Hey, greetings and welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. Really appreciate you braving the forecasts. I've been hearing about the forecast all day for the snowpocalypse coming up, and it's made me a little nervous, but really appreciate you coming out tonight. Really looking forward to the program. My name is Greg Hertzlieb, and I'm the director of the Brower Museum. Really grateful for the opportunity to work on this project. What happened was, got to know Nicholas Denishenko, and he told me about the opportunity to host at the Brower Museum the icons on the ammo boxes by Alexander Klemenko and Sofia Antwatova. It was an exciting idea for me to learn about. We started working together on it. Before we knew it, we had a campus committee where we were all working together on the project. And I think it's come together beautifully in the form of a lovely exhibition and now this evening of a lecture and gallery talk. I just want to give some acknowledgments before we start. I would like to thank, for the funding of this exhibition, the Emil and Elfrida Jochum Chair, the Phyllis and Richard Duesenberg Chair in Christianity and the Arts, the Center for Church Vocations, the Center for Church Relations, the Valparaiso University Department of Art, and the Valparaiso University Department of Theology. Now, what's going to happen this evening is that we will have our lecture with Father Hovran, and then after that we will go across the lobby to the Brower Museum, take a look at the exhibition, and we have the artists here tonight that will talk about their work in the context of the show. At this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to the colleague I mentioned earlier, the Abel and Elfrida Jochum Chair at Valparaiso University. Please join me in a nice warm round of applause for Dr. Nicholas Denishenko.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thanks to all of you who came out tonight, and also to all of the colleagues that Greg acknowledged who served in the committee and collaborated to put this event together. A very brief preface to the lecture that you are about to hear. Works of art have a story, and in the Byzantine Orthodox tradition, sometimes works of art have signatures on the bottom, so we know who either composed the music or who wrote the icon. Sometimes they're anonymous, but even an anonymous work of art has some kind of a story. And as is often the case in history, sometimes the most profound works of art that prophetically challenge our consciences and probe our humanity are works of art that emerge out of contexts of catastrophe. And we have the privilege tonight of actually being able to learn the story because the works of art are not anonymous, they are known to us. And we have the privilege of learning the story of that catastrophic context that resulted in profound works of art that are also liturgical and instruments of intercession and prayer. And that is a great privilege to us. And the person who is telling the story is a dear friend and colleague, Reverend Archimandrite Cyril Povorun from Kyiv, Ukraine. I've known Father Cyril now for many years. We met at the very well infamous known American Academy of Religion meeting where everyone is shopping for books. And Father Cyril is one of the most accomplished scholars and pastors in the Orthodox world. He has been educated in Kyiv and Durham and in Thessaloniki. He is fluent in several languages. He has written on diverse topics from patristics to ecclesiology. And he is now the acting director of the Huffington Ecumenical Institute at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, where I had the distinct pleasure of being his colleague for 1 year when I still lived there. Father Cyril's most recent books are titled Scaffolds of the Church in English and now translated into Ukrainian, which is a challenge to the traditional understanding of Orthodox ecclesiology. And I highly recommend to those of you who are interested in the intersection of politics and religion, Father Cyril's most recent book published on political orthodoxies. I promise you, you won't be able to put it down. It is that much of a challenge to the soul. Father Cyril graciously agreed to come to us today to provide us with his eyewitness account of the war in Donbass in Ukraine, to tell us the story that has about the catastrophe, the human catastrophe, that has resulted in the production of life-giving works of art. Please join me in welcoming Father Cyril Boverun.
Thank you for the words of introduction, for the kind words, Father Nicholas, and thank you for coming this evening to this presentation. It's really, I feel really privileged and honored to be here tonight at Valparaiso, of which I've heard a lot from Father Nicholas, and finally I had a chance to see your beautiful campus. So I was really impressed by the chapel. I saw some pictures of the chapel, but I didn't realize that it is so magnificent in real life. So congratulations on such a beautiful and impressive campus. Well, I was asked to give an introduction to the exhibition, which we will see soon, and I thought that I would probably bring to your attention some other pictures. So tonight will be a night, an evening of pictures. And before we see the paintings, actually the pictures, the real pieces of art, I want to show you some photos that I took in the eastern front of Ukraine. Usually, when I'm invited to talk about Ukraine, and it happens quite often nowadays, in the wake of the developments in the church there, in the wake of the war in the East, I usually theorize. I usually try to explain what happened, what were the driving forces behind the political developments in Ukraine, what were the ecclesial reasons for those developments. And tonight I decided not to theorize very much, but to show you what I've seen myself with my own eyes. I will tell you some stories that I've seen, and I've seen it quite accidentally, I would say. One summer day in Kiev, we met with Gennady, who is present here, and who is in charge of the movable hospital that operates in the east of Ukraine. And he told me that he's going to the east of Ukraine with an ambulance car, and a partner with whom he was supposed to go could not come with him, and he invited me to join him. So it was by pure accident that I joined him, and this journey to the east was a sort of life-changing personally for me. It was an experience of real war. It was an experience for me of real tragedy, of human life being fragile, being vulnerable. We were at risk of losing our lives ourselves, as I remember we were crossing from very high speed through the minefields to reach some places which were destroyed. I wanted to take pictures of those destroyed houses, and we were at the risk of being, fired by the Russian artillery and snipers. And we saw a car nearby which had been hit by Russian artillery just a day before us on the side of the road, and we were facing the same risk. So it was a real a life-changing experience with a lot of adrenaline, I should confess. And at the same time, it was not a dark experience. It was an experience of people living on the front line with hopes. It was an experience of hope. It was also an experience of fraternity, if you want, between people. It was an experience of value of human life, because we were among the doctors who helped local people and helped soldiers who were fighting in the front line. There were, of course, some sad stories. Like, for instance, just before we arrived, a doctor, a paramedical, told us a story how he dragged from a battlefield, from the minefield, a soldier who was just killed by a sniper, by a Russian sniper. And he was risking his own life, but he dragged the body of the soldier, and this was a doctor who belongs to the group, to this movable battalion, which is held by the art that you will see soon. So, and we will tell you the story in more detail. So I will bring you some pictures that I've seen owing to Gennady and his colleagues, and I will explain a bit about those pictures. So let me start with Google Maps. These are I just snapshot my phone to indicate the location where we were. We were just next to Donbass. Well, this is the area of Donbass. Half of it is occupied by the Russians, and including Donetsk itself, the central city of the region. Another half is under the control of the Ukrainian government. The thing about Google navigation is that it doesn't show you the front line. You don't know where to go. So it leads you, if you want to go to a place and ask Google to lead you there, it can lead you just try to to be in prison, to be a prisoner of war, or to be killed, or to a minefield. Therefore, don't use Google Map in the Donbass area. That is my very strong advice to you. You don't see the front line there, but you have to know, it is vital for your survival to know the front line, and you need to avoid, all those dangerous areas. And here you see how close we were to the front line. As we were entering the Donbass area, the area which half of it is occupied by the Russian forces, you see this welcoming indication. And immediately you see how that you enter a war zone. You can see it closer. You see the holes from bullets. So that was the area where the actual military action happened, and the troops exchanged shots, and those shots they remain on the indications. On our way to the Donbass area, we passed the city of Slavyansk, which is an interesting city. It was among the first Ukrainian cities occupied by Russians, and actually it was occupied by real Russians, not just by the proxies, who were, some of them were just Ukrainian separatists. But this city was occupied by the troops of Igor Girkin, who was an ex-Russian KGB person. Well, they say there are no ex in KGB. Yeah, they are always active. And his troops occupied the city, and they terrorized. They established a regime of terror in this city, and eventually it was liberated by the Ukrainian army in the summer 2014. And you see, they left the name of the city intact as it was shot by machine guns. You can see in more detail. They preserved the holes from shooting. You can see it better, and they made them like poppy flowers, just to commemorate that military operation, which was vital for Ukraine. And this city became a showcase of a peace being reinstated in the military zone. Nowadays it's like a prosperous, a joyful place to be at, and there are only some tokens of the war there, like this one. And of course, minefields, they are everywhere. And it's a strange thing, it's a very strange feeling, because those minefields are real fields with crops, with wheat, corn, and so forth, and they're beautiful if they are cultivated. But they are ugly when they are abandoned. And it's interesting, you see, it struck me that when we were driving along the road, on the one hand there were minefields, and they were abandoned. They looked like this. They used to be fields. On the other hand, where there are no mines, they are just like beautiful fields, ready to be harvested. And you see the ugliness and beauty of war and peace when you drive, literally. Mines and minefields are ugly. They are horrible. And the peaceful fields, the fields free of mines, they are beautiful. And it is reported that it has been reported that the eastern part of Ukraine is one of the most mined places in the world nowadays. And people, especially children who play there, they still, lose their limbs and sometimes lives. It's really a dangerous place to be at. And the funny thing, is that the mines are also on the edge of the road. But you don't, move to the edge of the road. You need to go straight along the road. If you hit the edge of it, you can trap a mine. So it's really, there are some tricks how to drive along those mines. Sorry about this self-promotion. That is another picture that I wanted to share with you. This is a school, an acting school, a real school. Pupils, they studied there when we went there. And you see what is in the window. They are blocked by sandbags to protect the school from the Russian artillery, because they shell charges during the classes, and pupils need to be protected, and that is the way how they protect their pupils. And this is the kind of everyday routine. They don't even, they don't even pay attention to this nature. They just live through this as their everyday life, as their everyday routine. This is another story. It's a mural on the wall of a house which faces Donetsk. Donetsk is occupied by Russians, and it's very close from this place. So the artillery from Donetsk can reach this place, and actually they fire their shells to this house. And there was, I think it was a Dutch artist who painted this mural. This is a face of a real person. She is a teacher in a school, in a local school. She's still alive. She taught Ukrainian language. And some of her pupils joined the Russian troops, the separatists, and now they fire against her face, against the face of their own teacher. And this is a very symbolic kind of picture. What kind of hatred it could be that your own pupil fires into your own face. And that is what is happening in the East. The house itself is semi-demolished. It's not livable, and still people live there, especially those people who can't move elsewhere. Some people just cannot afford or just don't leave those places, and some of those flats, accommodations, they are empty, or some of them are occupied by local people. That is such a house, you see. Some flats are destroyed and some are occupied still. You see in more detail how people, in what conditions people still live in the east of Ukraine. And again, shelling, firing, artillery, armors, it's an everyday experience for those people. When we were there, me personally, Gennady probably can tell more about his experience of shelling and exchange of fire. I didn't see it, I didn't witness it myself, but those windows, empty windows, tell more than one can tell what is really going on the everyday basis. And it is, I just want to repeat, this is happening even today, every day. It continues, it didn't stop. Even though CNN or BBC doesn't report about this, it's still happening. And it's an everyday experience for those people. There is another picture of that house, and the inscription says, "Our God save Avdiivka." Avdiivka is this city where this house is located. Some houses, however, are not livable anymore, even though people would probably continue staying there, but they can't. You see, this house was practically destroyed by the Russian artillery. Or like this one. This one was destroyed as well. And this house. Actually, to reach this point, where the houses were destroyed, we had to cross the open zone, which is exposed to the Russian snipers and artillery. And we had to run really, really quickly. And I probably never produced the same amount of adrenaline as I did at the time. But we reached the point that we had a chance to observe, to see those houses. And this one. No one lives there, of course. And no one lives there not just because houses are destroyed, but because they are permanently always at the crossfire. And they're always exposed to artillery shooting and snipers. Well, as a matter of fact, I should probably say that this war is a war of three kinds of activities. It's a war of artillery, when they exchange artillery charges. It's a war of snipers. And snipers take most lives in the East Front, as a matter of fact. And it's a war of small groups, operation groups, who enter the territory of the enemy, and they take hostages or just kill soldiers. And those are three main military activities which go on the everyday basis, and they claim lives almost every day. That is another evidence of ruins of houses in that area. Yeah, another striking experience there was the churches. This church is exactly located among those ruined houses. So you see around ruins of cottages, of living houses, and a church which stands intact and actually beautiful with golden domes, as you see. It's really striking. I could hardly explain this. On the one hand, I'm very glad that the churches are intact there. Well, as a priest, I'm happy that there is church, and people can go there, and people can find some relief in the church. On the other hand, I realize that it's a bit strange, because it seems that the church matters more than human life there. Human life costs less than, to go to a church. Human dignity costs less than that. And this is worrying. I think this is wrong. And you see this wrongness there, with the churches being intact and the houses and human lives being destroyed. It also kind of contradicts popular idea which is propelled by the Russian propaganda that the Ukrainian, soldiers, they attacked churches, they, want to destroy churches. We didn't see it. It just probably there are some churches which have been damaged by fire. But what happens that the separatists and the Russians, they use sometimes churches to fire shells to the Ukrainian side. And usually the strategy of artillery is to fire back to the same place. And in some cases, this was the reason why some churches were destroyed. But I personally didn't see it, though I saw pictures and photos that there were some damaged churches. But again, they were damaged in the return fire, because originally the first shots were made from the church compound, from the church ground. So the Russians actually used and continue to use churches as the platform to fire, with the hope that they will not be retaliated because it is the church. So that's a very weird, I would say, experience of the church, of the presence of the church in this area, in this territory of war. And what I should say in contrast to this attitude is the attitude demonstrated by the doctors and paramedicals who are organized and arranged by Gennady and his colleagues, because they invest a lot of effort into human life. And they demonstrate that human life really matters, and human dignity really matters. And that was the positive side of my experiences there. So those are the ambulances which brings doctors to the front line, and they actually operate in the front line. They evacuate wounded soldiers, and they also help local people, which is important. Those ambulances are mostly donations from donors, or they are bought through the icons which are sold. So the icons are sold, and the money goes to buy those ambulances and to support the mobile hospital. This is an interesting street, I remember. It is the headquarters of the hospital. And I asked a paramedical brother if I could walk along this street further down. And he told me, you can walk to a certain extent, but don't walk too much because you will be in the fire of snipers. So you could be hit by snipers. So they live in this territory of constant risk. They have to know where to go and where not to go, which places to avoid in order to survive. And this is their everyday experience, in which they still preserve joy, of fraternity, of solidarity, joy of helping other people, and this is really amazing. This was an amazing experience. Yes, and it was, you recognize Gennady, who is sitting here, and two doctors. This was an interesting instance. We caught those medics, those doctors, just before they had to go to a special operation of unmining. The protocol of unmining requires the presence of doctors always. They told that the Russians threw some shells which did not blast out. They had to be unmined, discharged, and the doctors had to be present during this discharging procedure. So they after we made this photo, they went to this discharging operation. Some of them they cannot show their faces for security reasons, as you probably understand. Yeah, and this I'd like to show you the conditions of doctor's life and the facilities that they have. This is the local hospital, as it were. And at the same time, it is a headquarter of the doctors at the front line. That's how they sleep. That is their bed. And that's just their window through which they observe beautiful nature. That is their everyday ammunition and appliances that they have to have with them on the everyday basis. Even though they help people, they still need to protect themselves. And that is the job of Gennady and his colleagues to train doctors to survive. The worst thing that you could imagine in the war when doctors die. And to prevent this, they have to be trained, and that's what the hospital does. They train doctors to survive fire, and they try to be to stay alive, not to be killed. That's the pharmacy. And I think this is the reception room where they receive their patients. This is their food. Well, this is actually Gennady distributing the Ukrainian borscht. It was delicious. This is an interesting picture and story. Some of those doctors are the ones who were brought through this movable hospital. Some of them came from the western part of Ukraine. And some of those doctors are local. They are Russian speaking, they have this local mentality, and they reconcile there in a wonderful way. They become friends. The Russian doctor, the local doctor, she said that she never had the chance to speak Ukrainian. Now she began speaking Ukrainian, actually, through the interaction with the doctors who were brought to the front line. And the same was with the Ukrainian. Well, the doctors from the Western Ukraine, they usually don't speak Russian, and there they switch to Russian, and it's a kind of a real token of reconciliation of the country. When the country, which was artificially divided into, the Russian-speaking, non-Russian-speaking, and so forth, this division became an instrument of the propaganda. The movable hospital, this art project, bring those people together and they reconcile them. They become friends. They feel that they belong to one thing, and they struggle for one cause, for the single cause. And there is another picture where kids send their paintings, their pictures to the soldiers to console them and to bring them some joy. Well, those are some circumstances of the life of the doctors on the front line. In general, I should say that the war seems absurd there. It is unnatural. It must not have happened. It is crazy that it is going on, because there are no preconditions for war. People are absolutely fine. People are brilliant there. People want to live in peace. People don't want to be divided by any ideological, cultural identity issue. They just want peace. And the very nature, I assure you, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's like that. It's from the window of our hotel. It's just amazing. The nature calls for reconciliation. And the same, it's like beauty at 4 a.m. in the morning or so at the dawn. So there are no reasons for this war. The only reason is a madness of one person, and we know his name. And it's this crazy propaganda which gets propelled through media, which brainwashes people, and which urges them to take guns in their hands and to fight, for some crazy ideas of the Russian world, of this ideological construct which has no ground, in the mentality of the people, which has no ground, in the environment, which is a pure phantasm, a pure kind of crazy idea. Still, it drives people. Still, because of this idea, people are ready to kill one another. But the projects like the one that we are talking about, they do the opposite. They try to reconcile people. They try to demonstrate, humanity, compassion, empathy as a way out of this division, of this war, towards reconciliation and eventually towards peace. That's what I wanted to share with you. I will be happy to answer any question if you have. You will see more in the exhibition and you will be explained more in the exhibition. And well, that's my experience, my personal experience, my personal witness that I would like to deliver to you. Thank you for your attention.
You spoke of the churches, the buildings in your presentation. I'm wondering about the church in terms of its ministers, the priests, the leaders. What is their ministry like among the people, and what position are they taking in the war? Are they taking a position at all? Are they helping to bring about peace?
Yeah. Well, it's complicated, of course, as everything in the East, and it's difficult to answer in one phrase or one paragraph about this. I would say that unfortunately the Orthodox Church has not developed a tremendous charitable activity there. I mean the Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, who's present there. I should say that the church, the Orthodox Church, has supported tremendously the chaplain kind of ministry, particularly what used to be the Kiev Patriarchate, now it's the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, has become particularly remarkable for sending a lot of chaplains to the East Front. So they take care about soldiers and local people equally. I should emphasize probably the charitable activities of the Catholic Church. It is tremendous. It is really important. They really know how to help people in need, and they do it very well. There's a special program supervised personally by the Pope, who it's called, I think, Pope for Ukraine, and they provide a lot of facilities for refugees, for people in need. I wish the Orthodox we could match this sort of understanding activities. Otherwise, if you speak about the local diocese, there is a diocese there. The center of this diocese is in the occupied Donetsk and Luhansk, but it also takes care of the Ukrainian controlled areas. I don't think they have developed a huge charitable activity, to be honest. They are concentrated on rites, on providing liturgies for people, which is fine, which is good. But in the front line, you need always something more than just liturgy, I should confess. You need social ethics, you need charitable work, you need a lot of humanism and empathy.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's really premature, I know, to kind of speculate on this, but what do you see this new autocephalous Orthodox Church in Ukraine bringing to bear on this war? Do you think it aggravating, even with what's it?
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful about the role of the new church, newly established church regarding the war. The new church is, I believe it is important for the church to acknowledge the war. That is a very important thing. Not to use euphemism that, or try to avoid a serious conversation about the war, to keep silence, to ignore the war, to be neutral to the war. I think it is wrong to be neutral to the war. You cannot be neutral to the war. You need to acknowledge the war and then to find a solution to the war. What the Ukrainian church, the new Ukrainian church has done very well, is to acknowledge the war, to acknowledge the tragedy of people, to provide some first help to those people as well. What it still lacks is a systematic work to, maybe to the extent that the Catholic Church has developed with all its limited resources, to bring relief to people, to deal with traumas of people. This is more sophisticated work, and we, the Orthodox, I believe we need to learn how to do that. And we rely very much on the experience of our brothers in other churches, in the Catholic Church, in the Protestant churches, and so forth, and so forth. So we still need to learn that. But we've made, I think the new church has made the first and very important step, but it's not the last one.
Do you think this could potentially create more cultural friction, or no?
I hope so. I hope so. But again, the new church has to show an understanding to the other position. In terms of what I mean is that the indication of more mature attitude to this tragedy of the war will be the attitude of the new church to the Moscow Patriarchate. Because as a result of the step of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, there are two churches now, two canonical churches. One is the independent church, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, and another is the Moscow Patriarchate. And if they try to find reconciliation with one another, if they try not to exterminate each other, what they try to do, this will lead them to a healthier strategy regarding the war in Ukraine. Then they will be able to demonstrate how it is possible to reconcile people traumatized by the war. Because the people are traumatized on both sides of the conflict. For different reasons. I don't want to judge now the reasons, but that is a reality. And the new church has to demonstrate this understanding, this embracing attitude to all people of Ukraine. And this will begin with their attitude to their own brothers in other jurisdictions, including Greek Catholics, including Catholics in Ukraine. So if there will be peace and ecumenical rapprochement between those churches in Ukraine, in the free part of Ukraine as well, so to say, then they will be able to help people in the east of Ukraine as well. That's my kind of take on it.
Thank you for your talk. I have a couple small questions and then a larger one. Just one is, when exactly were you there? When did these pictures come from? What year, what time of year?
Yes, it was last summer, June, and it was the area nearby Donetsk.
And when you were out moving on the ground, did you wear anything to distinguish yourself as
No, I
priest,
didn't.
or it wasn't company?
No. Hmm?
It was medical.
Yeah, it was just an ambulance, yeah. But I didn't wear my, priest outfit. I wore my jeans and, stuff.
Right. And were you ever fired on?
No.
And then at the end of your presentation, you described propaganda.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, especially for those of us who don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, could you describe the propaganda as it would be experienced by the people? What is that message? How does it operate? What's its media?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question. Of course, we will need another talk to discuss it. But I should say it's a typical. You have experienced this. You experienced this as post-truth, and post-truth began not in 2016. It began for us. It began in 2014, and maybe even earlier. We were the first barrier against the post-truth as it was emerging. You probably know that post-truth became the word of the year in 2016 by Oxford Dictionaries, when people experienced it in the West. But in Ukraine, we began seeing and feeling it then. So what you understand when you say post-truth, that's what propaganda is. I can tell you just one trick of the propaganda, just for instance. For example, usually in the West, people try to find truth somewhere in between 2 points, 2 positions, standpoints. They believe that, well, one source says this, another source says this, and the truth should be somewhere in between. That's how the propaganda operates. They try to put the other point as further as possible, even to the very absurd statements. And that's how people face and get shocked by absurd statements. But the purpose of those absurd statements is exactly to move the middle as further from truth as possible. And that's how, for instance, it operates in the West.
So, can you describe the message of it? Like, what's the story being told?
Like, for instance, yes, it's very simple. Say that. Yeah, one of them was that in exactly in Slavyansk, the city that I've shown to you, the Russian TV told a story that there was a boy who was crucified in that city by the Ukrainian troops. And that story was told by a woman who was supposedly a witness of this story. And this happened in spring 2014. And this became a big story in the Russian media, immediately spread around. And this mobilized a lot of thousands of people to go and fight in the Eastern Front, in Ukraine, from Russia. But that story appeared to be faked, completely fake. It was never proven. And actually that woman who told this story was an actress. She was just, playing on TV. And that's how this myth was constructed. And it actually worked very well because it mobilized thousands of people, including warriors who went to the Eastern Front, east of Ukraine to fight against Ukrainians. And those stories are multiple. There is a legion of them. Yep.
Father Cyril, can you, for those of us who followed the story in the West and who aren't familiar with what's going on the inside, there tends to be a sort of mythology prevailing that says that there are 2 Ukraines,
Yeah.
West Ukraine and East Ukraine. West Ukraine being European and Ukrainian speaking, and East Ukraine being pro-Russian, anti-EU, and leaning towards Russia. Can you help us understand the reality on the ground, based on your experience? How should we see Ukraine when we hear it in the news?
Yeah, I think it's wrong to present Ukraine as 2 countries divided by the river Dnieper, the left bank of Dnieper, which is more pro-Russian, and the right bank of Dnieper, which is more pro-Ukrainian. I think it is wrong. It has become an instrument of the propaganda. What I've seen personally is like my closest friends, whom I know personally very well, and who are probably the most ardent Ukrainian patriots. They come from the Donbass area. And recently there was a story when the Russian Federation gave to Ukraine, extradited to Ukraine, a Ukrainian propagandist. She was originally from Lviv, from the western part of Ukraine. And she did a lot to propagate this hatred against Ukraine in Russia. I think that the vision, well, we still can speak about 2 Ukraines if you want, but they are not the western part of Ukraine and eastern part of Ukraine. They are the Ukraine which takes events responsibly, which requires from people responsible choices about their life and the life of their country. And there is another Ukraine, I would say a Soviet style of Ukraine, with a highly paternalistic people who believe that nothing depends on them, that it is someone who should come and do something for them instead of them. It is a Soviet type of mentality which survives everywhere in the country, throughout the country, in the western part of Ukraine, in the eastern part of Ukraine, everywhere. And there are Ukrainians who are responsible and aware about their what they should do, what responsibility they should bear. They constitute the core of the volunteer movement in Ukraine, which is tremendous, which is a phenomenal in the world, worldwide. And they live everywhere in Ukraine, in the east or in the west, everywhere. Like, for instance, I will tell you a story, another story. It's a story of a woman. Probably I don't know if I should tell, but I will tell you without names. It's a story of a Ukrainian resistance on the occupied territory, which consists of women. And they are Russian-speaking, women, and they are ardent Ukrainian patriots who decided to resist the occupation regime. And they decided that it's completely up to them to decide for themselves, to define their fate, to be masters of their life. And they formed a group, a network of resistance, and they tried, to help local people. Sometimes they smuggle things through the border from Ukraine to the occupied territories to help, like medicines, pills and stuff, to help local people. Some of them were caught and tortured, and others helped them to, through publication in Western media about those cases. They helped them to be liberated eventually, so that the separatists, the occupants, they actually had to liberate those women. I can tell you this in more detail. I cannot tell everything, publicly now, because it's, they are still vulnerable, those women. But in private, I can tell you more detail about them. And this is an indication of a group of Ukrainians living in the east of Ukraine who took complete responsibility about themselves and their country. They are a new generation of people who don't have this Soviet style of paternalism, of believing in the good Tsar, Putin or whoever, who will come and help them, and solve all their problems. Therefore, there is a division in Ukraine, but this division is not geographical. It is a division in mentality. It is new Ukrainian mentality and Soviet mentality versus Soviet mentality. And essentially, I believe what Russia has done is that Russia has exploited this Soviet mentality, fed people with promises of Soviet style of past, that it would come. They actually try to play with the nostalgia about the Soviet time that many people, especially in the East, they have, but also equally in the West, in Kiev and so forth. In some sense, the Maidan that happened in 2014, the Revolution of Dignity, it was a revolution against this Soviet style of paternalism. It was a revolution of responsible citizens who revolted against paternalism. And the war continues, the same kind of struggle between responsible citizens and people with Soviet style of nostalgia and paternalism. There are responsible people everywhere in Ukraine, in the east, in the west, in the center, and there are people with that Soviet burden of paternalism also everywhere in Ukraine. So that would be my answer. Okay, our time is over, right? Good.
Thank you, Father Cyril, for very sobering and informative eyewitness account of Donbass and of the realities on the ground in Ukraine. And I think now it's time to make a ritual procession from our recital hall here to the exhibit, where we will learn how artists and how art is contributing to giving life to places in Ukraine that have suffered from human catastrophe. So let us, as orderly as possible, make our ritual procession from the recital hall to the Ferguson Gallery.